Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan is a cinematic experience that lingers far beyond its final frame. It is a film that does not simply tell a story, but pulls the audience into a relentless psychological vortex, forcing us to witness the terrifying process of self-destruction while simultaneously admiring the horrifying beauty it produces. On the surface, the film presents the story of Nina Sayers, a gifted ballerina whose ambition and obsession drives her towards the starring role of the White Swan and the Black Swan in Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. Yet beneath this veneer of narrative simplicity lies a profoundly disturbing meditation on obsession, identity, control, and the violence inherent in the pursuit of artistic perfection. Aronofsky does not merely depict Nina's struggles, he makes the audience feel them in real time, translating a psychological breakdown into a visceral cinematic language, where mirrors distort reality, shadows threaten sanity, and the human body becomes an unstable, almost alien instrument of both artistic expression and personal torment. What makes Black Swan so unforgettable is the way it blurs the boundaries between reality and hallucination, control and surrender, innocence and corruption. Nina's descent into madness is not linear, and neither is our perception of it. Aronofsky carefully constructs a world in which the external pressures of ballet, familial expectation, and professional competition mirrors the internal pressures of Nina's psyche, creating a kaleidoscope of anxiety and desire in which the audience is trapped right alongside her. Her hallucinations, her injuries, and her obsessive behaviors are presented with the same weight and immediacy as the narrative itself, eroding the distinction between what is real and what is imagined. This technique fosters empathy for Nina, even as we recoil from the extremity of her behavior, because we recognize within her struggle a reflection of our own insecurities, fears, and desires for perfection. Ultimately, Black Swan is a film about the price for artistic and personal transcendence, a celebration of the human spirit's capacity to create beauty, and a warning of its fragility under relentless pressure. The film presents beauty not as a gentle or comforting ideal, but as a form of madness that is seductive, intoxicating, and destructive. In exploring the interplay between obsession, identity, and self-destruction, Aronofsky's work challenges the audience to question the cost of excellence, the limits of human endurance, and the tenuous boundary between self-discipline and self-annihilation. It is this tension between aspiration and destruction that Black Swan achieves its haunting, unforgettable impact. From the very first moments of Black Swan, the viewer is confronted with a world in which perfection is both demanded and feared. Nina Sayers' life is meticulously regimented, organized around the pursuit of flawless execution and unassailable technical precision. She inhabits a meticulously controlled environment, from her sterile apartment to the meticulously choreographed routines of her rehearsals. Every aspect of her existence is designed to reinforce the message that imperfection is intolerable. Her mother Erica embodies the cruelty of misplaced devotion, her overbearing affection doubling as an instrument of control. Erica's former aspirations, long suppressed, are projected onto her daughter in the form of constant guidance, admonishment, and subtle intimidation. Nina in turn internalizes these expectations, developing a self-critical mindset that is both rigorous and merciless. Her ambition is inseparable from fear. To fail is to betray not only herself, but the web of control that has defined her entire life. Ballet, as depicted by Aronofsky, is a world of absolute discipline and relentless scrutiny. The pursuit of technical perfection is inseparable from psychological strain, and the dancers themselves are depicted as both objects of admiration and victims of cruelty. Thomas Leroy, the company's enigmatic artistic director, personifies this duality, encouraging Nina to unleash her repressed passions while simultaneously manipulating and humiliating her. He insists that to embody the Black Swan, she must shed control, embrace darkness, and express a raw sensuality that feels alien to her. Yet he also enforces this demand within a framework of intimidation and psychological pressure, illustrating the inherent contradictions of a system that celebrates emotional expression only when it is coerced. The ballet world in Black Swan is thus both aspirational and punitive, offering the promise of transcendence while simultaneously punishing the very impulses that makes such transcendence even possible. What makes Nina's pursuit of perfection particularly tragic is that it is externally imposed as much as it is internally generated. Her relentless self-discipline is a response to constant observation and judgment, not an autonomous choice. Perfection becomes a prison. Every step must be flawless, every expression perfectly timed, and every emotion precisely measured. In this environment, there is no room for experimentation, error, or even vulnerability. Mistakes are catastrophic because they signal a failure of character as well as skill. In attempting to eliminate all traces of imperfection, Nina erodes the very foundation of her identity, leaving a hollow shell where her authentic self once resided. Perfection is presented not as liberation or accomplishment, but as a form of existential bondage, one that requires a psychological toll far more profound than any physical injury. The oppressive pursuit of perfection, combined with the pressures of familial expectation and professional scrutiny, sets the stage for Nina's psychological collapse. When identity is contingent entirely upon external validation, failure ceases to be a temporary setback and becomes an almost existential threat. In Black Swan, madness is not an abrupt intrusion, but a slow, inevitable erosion of certainty and control. As Nina's body and mind are pushed to extremes, every minor deviation from the ideal is magnified, every misstep laden with existential significance. In this crucible of expectation, obsession, and vulnerability intertwine, it sets the stage for the catastrophic unraveling that becomes the film's central drama. As Nina Sayers becomes increasingly consumed by the demands of perfection from people all around her, Aronofsky's visual and narrative language shifts to reflect her fracturing psyche. Mirrors, reflections, and doubling motifs dominate the film, functioning not merely as stylistic choices, but as manifestations of Nina's internal disintegration. In her reflection, Nina perceives not only herself, but an autonomous, often antagonistic other, a version of herself that embodies the impulses and desires she has since long suppressed. The mirror becomes a site of confrontation and betrayal, a threshold between the disciplined, controlled self and the chaotic, instinctual self that seeks recognition. Aronofsky's use of visual distortion, including subtle changes in posture, lighting, and perspective, intensifies the sense that Nina's perception is unreliable, destabilizing both character and audience simultaneously. The character of Lily represents the most overt externalization of Nina's repressed qualities. Where Nina is controlled, cautious, and meticulous, Lily is impulsive, sensual, and uninhibited. She moves through the world with an ease and confidence that Nina both envies and fears. Yet Lily is not simply a rival, she is a living mirror, a reflection of the qualities Nina must confront within herself. Their interactions are charged with tension and unacknowledged desire, yet their true significance lies in their symbolic resonance. The struggle between Nina and Lily is not a conventional rivalry, but a confrontation with duality, the tension between the white swan and the black swan, between innocence and sensuality, between control and chaos. In this sense, the film becomes less of a story about external competition and more a psychological study of internal conflict. Aronofsky amplifies this theme through increasingly hallucinatory sequences. Blurring the boundary between perception and reality, blood appears on Nina's body in ways that are impossible. Hallucinations intrude upon reality without warning, and her physical form begins to betray her through involuntary movements, scratches, and injuries. The audience, aligned with Nina's subjective experience, cannot confidently distinguish between actual events and projections of her own mind. Madness in Black Swan is not a sudden rupture, but a gradual collapse of distinction between body and mind, self and other, reality and one's imagination. The climax of this process is Nina's full transformation into the Black Swan, a metamorphosis that grants her emotional liberation and artistic mastery, but demands the obliteration of the rigid, controlled identity she has inhabited her entire life. Liberation and destruction becomes inseparable, illustrating Aronofsky's central assertion: the pursuit of perfection can only be achieved through self-fragmentation. Black Swan is ultimately a meditation on the relationship between artistry and self-sacrifice. Nina's transformation into the Black Swan is portrayed as both triumphant and catastrophic, achieving artistic perfection while exacting an irreversible personal cost. Aronofsky juxtaposes her final performance with preceding sequences of physical pain, psychological torment, and intimate conflict, underscoring the inseparability of artistic accomplishment from self-destruction. In this sense, the film critiques not only individual obsession, but the broader structures of artistic and cultural production that glorify suffering in the name of perfection. Nina's fate is horrifyingly precise because it is both extraordinary and preventable, a product of external pressure, internalized expectations, and systemic demand for ultimate devotion to the craft. Thomas Leroy's insistence that Nina lose herself to embody the Black Swan exemplifies the paradoxical cruelty of these structures. The director encourages emotional freedom, authenticity, and sensuality, yet his methods rely on manipulation, intimidation, and psychological pressure. The narrative suggests that true artistry in this context is only achievable through violence towards oneself, towards personal boundaries, and towards the stable self. Nina internalizes this imperative, responding with both compliance and extreme distress. In the process, Aronofsky explores the dangerous seduction of obsessive ambition. The allure of perfection is inseparable from its potential to annihilate the self. The audience witnesses not only Nina's triumph on stage, but the invisible sacrifices underpinning it. The sleepless nights, the self-harm, the alienation, and the complete surrender of control. The final act, culminating in Nina's whispered declaration, "I was perfect," crystallizes the film's central tension. There is beauty in her accomplishment, a transcendent, electrifying artistry that captivates the audience within the narrative and the audience watching the film. Yet, there is also horror, for the perfection Nina achieves is inseparable from the destruction of her previous self. Aronofsky does not provide closure, redemption, or consolation. Instead, he presents the audience with a paradoxical triumph that is both exhilarating and devastating. This ambiguity reinforces the film's thematic preoccupation with the cost of excellence and the fine line between creative mastery and self-annihilation. Beyond the individual tragedy, Black Swan functions as a critique of cultural narratives that valorize obsessive devotion, extreme discipline, and self-denial. Nina's story resonates because it reflects real-world pressures in competitive fields, whether artistic, academic, or professional. It challenges audiences to consider whether achievements earned through total self-sacrifice are truly admirable or if they are inherently tragic. The film asks us to confront uncomfortable questions. How much of ourselves are we willing to surrender to attain greatness? When does ambition become destructive? And who determines the acceptable limits of sacrifice? By refusing to provide easy answers, Aronofsky crafts a narrative that is both intellectually stimulating and emotionally affecting, leaving audiences to wrestle with these questions long after the credits themselves begin to roll. Black Swan is a film that endures precisely because it resists simplification. It is not a conventional thriller, a morality tale, or a biopic. It is a psychological exploration of obsession, identity, and the often devastating cost of artistic perfection. Aronofsky's meticulous direction, Natalie Portman's transcendent performance, and the film's dense visual narrative architecture coalesce to create a work that is both beautiful and horrifying, thrilling and unsettling. The audience experience Nina's descent into madness not as a detached observation, but as an immersive, often unbearable journey, confronting us with the uncomfortable truth that the pursuit of perfection is both seductive and destructive. The film's brilliance lies in its refusal to romanticize suffering while simultaneously demonstrating its seductive power. Nina's final triumph, celebrated by audiences in the narrative and appreciated by viewers of the film, is inseparable from the self-destruction that made it possible. Perfection and annihilation coexist, each reinforcing the other, creating a tension that is intellectually provocative and emotionally wrenching both at the same time. Aronofsky challenges us to consider the paradoxical nature of human aspiration. The desire to transcend oneself can inspire beauty, but it can also exact a catastrophic toll. In this sense, Black Swan is not merely a story about ballet, obsession, or psychological collapse. It is a meditation on the human condition, on the fragility of identity, and on the complex interplay between discipline, desire, and self-destruction. In the final analysis, Black Swan asks more questions than it answers. It forces us to reckon with the cost of excellence, the ambiguity of success, and the devastating allure of perfection. It reminds us that beauty is often inseparable from madness, and that the most extraordinary achievements may carry hidden, irreparable costs. Aronofsky's film is a testament to the terrifying brilliance of human ambition, a cautionary tale, and a work of art that is as unsettling as it is truly unforgettable. Through Nina Sayers' journey, we are compelled to confront the limits of human endurance, the fragility of identity, and the seductive, often destructive power of obsession. Black Swan is, in every sense, a celebration of the beautiful madness inherent in striving to become more than oneself, and a chilling reminder that the pursuit of perfection can come at the ultimate price.